There are acres of eyeballs out there.
I can't see. Cataract.
It's a rare and happy privilege for me today. No, was that better? Yeah, it is a rare and happy privilege for me today to be able to introduce a loved and honored friend of nearly 30 years, and one who was very important to me in my early days of sobriety. Right after World War II, a young and bouncy Nell popped out of the U.S. Coast Guard service. After trying a few other things, landed on the doorstep of what is now the General Service Office of Alcoholics Anonymous in New York City. For a number of years, she was the only non-alcoholic on the staff there. For 20 years, she was secretary to Bill W., co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous and chief architect of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Along the way, she acquired some other duties, like being executive secretary of the General Service Board of AA, publications editor, and if you see all the pamphlets and the books and stuff out there, you can see what a task that might have been.
Not bad then.
And all the time collecting and filing data, which became in time the foundation for the archives of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when, for the 10 years prior to Nell's retirement in 1982, she was the archivist of the AA. If that weren't enough, on alternate weekends, she was going up to Stepping Stones, which is the home of Bill Lois and Bill W. in Bedford Hills, New York, and taking care of Lois's correspondence, which must have gotten voluminous because Nell was the founder of Al-Anon. Or, excuse me, Lois was the founder of Al-Anon. In 1965... In 1965, I'd been dry and somewhat sober for a little over a year, and by a chain of fortuitous circumstances connected with a catch-22 situation I was in relation to my job with an airline, I ended in the hands of Bill W. And since we couldn't make contact to meet, it was one day that he spent in the office in New York. He invited me to come up and spend a weekend with he and Lois and Nell in Stepping Stones. And Bill knew that my two previous sponsors had gone out and done some more research for us. One day, Nell informed me that Bill considered himself my sponsor. But that's another story for another time. I spent many happy weekends in Stepping Stones with these three wonderful people. Those of you who were at the AA convention in Seattle in 1990 had the opportunity to witness Nell being honored and being given, presented the 1 millionth copy of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Last year in 1992, it's more fun being a straight man than a speaker. In 1982, Nell was asked, urged, pleaded with, cajoled, and finally agreed to write her memoirs. She calls it Grateful to Have Been There. The subtitle, My 42 Years with Bill and Lois and the Evolution of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can't improve on the words in the preface to this great little book. And it reads in part.
Hey. I'll read something else here.
It reads in parts. No other living person knows more about how Alcoholics Anonymous developed and how it grew. No other living person has been as close and perceptive an observer of the excitement, the turbulence, and the spiritual underpinnings of what may be the most important social movement of the 20th century. With a full heart, I invite you to help me to welcome to our first ever Monterey Bay Area Roundup, Miss Nell Wing.
Thank you, Chuck. That was very good. Hi. Just one more little correction. I wasn't a staff member. In many ways, I had some of the staff responsibilities in the very beginning when I came there in 1947. I was receptionist. Well, let me just have an opening and give my very, very sincere and beloved thanks to all of you, to Jerry and the committee, to Todd Smith, who I had a little eye-opener because Todd Smith is also the name of Bob Smith, Dr. Bob's son, Bob Jr.'s son. So I thought, how did Todd Smith get here? And so it was a different Todd Smith and a very nice one, too, in there. Also, of course, I'm very grateful to Chuck for being here, and we've had a long, long friendship, as you said, so I can play little tricks and do things like that, and he won't care. And I hope to the beginning that you will excuse the note. I'm now 76. My memory is going down through the slats of the floor, and not so much for a lot of recollections and the memoirs, but for about 10 seconds past. Can't remember what happened. It's very scary. My nephew wanted me to come over, and I did go over to his group in New Jersey, and I did it all offhand, as I usually do. And before I knew it, I was saying, oh gosh, why did I say that? Because one anecdote would lead to another, and I would forget what originally I had started out to say. And one guy, sitting in the front seat, yelled out what I meant, where I was. And I made about 10 different faults like that, and everybody was sitting on the edge of the seat waiting for me to do it so they could yell out where I was. I hope I don't do that too often. Anyway, please excuse the notes. I hope you won't mind. You know, I wish I had a story to tell, but if I told my drinking story, you'd be long gone. I'd be here, but you wouldn't. So we won't get into that at all. During the 40s, I had a time when we ladies were traveling all over doing our own thing. Oh, it was a great time. Except for Paradas. I was in the Coast Guard. She knows that. Anyway, what I wanted to say was that I am apt to, without notes, also overspeak. I go on and on and on and on. Everybody knows that. In fact, one time I thought maybe I might form a new group called Over Speakers Anonymous. I still don't think that would be a bad idea. Get a little system into the whole thing. Also, one of my favorite stories that I heard years ago, I think it was at the New York banquet. The speaker from Australia said this little story. He said there were two friends who came into a meeting one night, and they were sitting there with the group in the audience, and they were waiting and for the talk to proceed and get going, and which it did. Went for a half hour, then an hour and a half. And finally, one of the friends was getting very fidgety, and he's looking all around the walls and whatnot. And his friend said to him, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And a clock? And the friend said, "No, I'm looking for a calendar." And so that is often one of the things when I said I was telling Midge, one of our staff members, that how difficult it was to tell in a prescribed length of time what I wanted to say about history. I'm an old history teacher, by the way, so listen up. And describe the people, the events, the places, what happened. It is very necessary, and I won't go into that right now. But I was telling Midge about this, and I said, "Gee, it's awfully hard to know what stories to tell, what is most important, etc." She said, "Look, Nell," she said, "you don't have to tell everything, you know." And I said, "Well, okay, that's I really truly never thought of that." It was kind of like Alice in Wonderland. It's a long time since I read the story, but Alice wanted to tell, I can't remember what it was, a story, her story, or get some idea of what she was going through and for what reason, et cetera, et cetera. So she asked the good queen where to begin. The good queen draws herself up at her height and looks down at Alice and says, "Why, of course, begin at the beginning. That's where you begin." And I thought, "Oh, that's good. That's a very, very smart thing to say. That's where it should be anyway." And so, okay, so that will do it for me. And we'll go back briefly, I hope. I'll try 54 years when I first heard about AA. I was a junior in college in 1939 in college upstate New York. And I heard about this Liberty magazine. Of course, we were reading Liberty magazines because everybody, it was kind of it wasn't staid and not very interesting like Saturday Post or Reader's Digest or things like that. It was kind of full of good stuff. And so we all enjoyed Liberty magazine, and inside that was one very good article called Alcoholics and God by Morris Markey. And I read that, and immediately I was so taken, and I have no idea why, except I do in a way. My dad was a teacher, professor, and a justice of the peace in our little small town. We were used to, our family, about 3 o'clock maybe once a week at least, maybe twice a week, with the state police coming in, dragging a drunk in to my dad's for DWI or whatever it might be. Now, half of these people were my father's good friends, and they were professional people in the small town, one to be a mayor, one to be whatever. And this went on, and I learned very quickly, very early on, that an alcoholic is not necessarily a Bowery bum. And this was what one of the good outcomes, the good message of a good movie called Lost Weekend in the middle 40s meant, because here was a good businessman and had started to drink and was drinking and went down to the level of a Bowery bum. And I learned that very early. And so, anyway, I graduated from school. I went teaching down in Mexico, and I was wanted to be headed for Mexico, but I was in San Antonio, my mother's hometown. Taught for a while in a Mexican school there. Came back, had secretarial experience, and became a secretary. A couple friends at the office where I was working wanted to go into the bars, and wanted to know if I wanted to come along and join. I said, no, not really, I'm not that interested. Finally, they persuaded me, and I did go. I took the tests, and they persuaded me to do that, and the oral exams and physicals. I passed everything, they didn't. So I found myself a week later raising my right hand, hoping to die to protect my country. And so I did that for 2 years out of Seattle. And that was always good to get back there because I had so many memories of that state and that city. So what I did then was come back after bars and decided now I really know the serious relationship in mind. So I decided I'd go down to Mexico and sculpture, which is what I really like. I went down to New York City to get a job because I needed a little more money than my mustering out pay. It wasn't very big. And so I went to an employment agency, and the lady took my resume, read it, came back, sat across me from the table, and she said, "How would you like to work at Alcoholics Anonymous?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love it." I just yelled it out and just blew her right off her chair. And anyway, I decided, what's that if a little temporary job? This is super. And so on Monday morning, I went to the office, and Marion, there just had been a little turnaround at that point of some effort to bring order out of chaos. And I could tell you, I can't go into all the stories. There's too many. And so Marion interviewed me, and finally she was just out of the waves, and I was out of the stars. And so we talked about that. Finally, I thought, gee, I got to get around to seeing what I'm going to get for the money, salary. So I asked her, and she said, "Now, Nell, we are a spiritual program, and we do spiritual good for people." I said, "Okay, I know, I got the message. I know what it is." So instead of temporary job, I was there for 36 years. And just then, to hurry it up a little bit, I was a receptionist for the first 7 years and started in 50. This was in March 3rd. I'm talking about 47 when I came to the office. And I did Bill's job, Bill's work, helped with him with his work, 1950 until he died in 71, January 71. That's 20 years. And then, of course, in the next 17 years, I was also a very good companion, very close to Lois. And it was a disaster when she died and passed away, except we knew it was going to happen. It's hard to take in your family, which Bill and Lois were to me, possibilities of passing into another life existence and whatnot. Anyway, that is roughly what. Then I ended up, after Bill died, and started doing some other jobs, and then in the 80s I started doing the archives. Or I started doing the archives in 71 after he died, until I retired, so-called retired, until 1982. And it's been a joy to remain around ever since and all of that. It's been so wonderful to be invited out. And that has been the real mainstream of my growth. It has been ever since I came to the fellowship. I won't go into what I learned, because you know what I learned. It's how to love people, how to give of yourself, how to be hopefully kind of a spiritual person. It has kept on going and all that time. Also, one of the joys of all that time that I spent was meeting so many people, not only wonderful AA friends, but professional people. I knew so many and know so many. So many have left us in the last couple of years. It's very, very sad. One of the ones that I enjoyed so much was Irving Harris. Irving was a great friend of Sam Shoemaker, and helped him in the latter days after Sam had gone through that decision in 41, called out to the Oxford group out there in British Columbia to respond to what was going on and his attitude towards the Oxford groups and all that. Anyway, the decision of they came to what's called the decision of 41. And after that time, that event, Sam became closer even to Irving Harris, who helped him with a newsletter called Faith at Work. And possibly a lot of you know this story. Pardon me, Sam and Irving often use the words, "it works, it works." Sam said, like Christianity, it works. And that was really, I think, the place where it came to AA, Work Publishing, and I know that Ann Smith also used Faith at Work. But I still think it was more Sam's influence on that. Anyway, Irving wrote a book called Rays of the Spirit, and it is a wonderful, wonderful story. This is before he died. It's a wonderful story of what the Oxford group was all about, what Sam Shoemaker was all about. He talks about Bill. He gives a marvelous background. Lois and I went over to Bermuda, where Julie and Irv spent their winters, and I wanted to get him on tape. This was for the archives. And anyway, so we went over there, and I did interview him, had a good interview with him, and we were good friends. And one time, no, I don't think it, yes, it was Irving, still around at that time, when the Oxford groups called the Willowbank Community in Bermuda met. And neither Lois and I were too aware of their still association, and they're still going on at that time. Anyway, we had our hotel, so to speak, over in that area. We were out one day walking around and sightseeing, and came back to the Willowbank, and in the big living room, here was a lot of people gathered, and we said, oh, fine. Lois and I looked at our watches, and it was tea time, 4 o'clock. We said, okay, we'll go and have a cup of tea, which we did, and found out that we were in the middle of an Oxford group meeting. And it was so exciting. And so if anybody asks me, do I know anything about Oxford group meetings, have I ever been to one? I have, indeed. It's very exciting. This book is published it's called A Crosswords Book by Seabury Press in New York. But I would suggest if you ever find it and want to try to investigate further about it or see it in the bookstores, please do, because it's full of history. It's full of information about those very, very early days. Believe me. Okay, now what I want to do is, here we're talking about old-timers, and I guess, there's such a, how do you describe an old-timer? I guess any of us could be called an old-timer in any type of work we were in, or anything we contributed, or in terms of what we remember in any given time frame. So what I'll do is say you're an old-timer if. You're an old-timer if you remember nickel therapy. Remember nickel therapy? Anybody? Well, in the old days, when you wanted to call your sponsor on the phone, outside or whatever, you put in a nickel, because that's what it took in those days, in those early days. And it got to be called nickel therapy. And I suppose now it'd be called 25-cent therapy or whatever. And you certainly were an old-timer, can be called an old-timer, if you sponsored a new baby instead of a pigeon. Or if you call MCA, and you still call it NCEA. This is Marty, of course. Marty's in National Council on Alcoholism, but she initially called it, during the 40s, National Council for Education on Alcoholism. So old-timers know that. And, of course, if you read the second Saturday Evening Post article by Jack Alexander in 1950, have any of you read that? Called The Drunkard's Best Friend. It was a good article, but it didn't compare with the excitement that one found in that early one in 1941. It wasn't all that, it was a good article. And it, pardon me, Jack contributed so much to this fellowship. It was really, even up to the time he died. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. Also, you're an old-timer if you remember meeting or knowing Dr. Bob, Bill, or Dr. Silkworth, or Ebby. Oof, I could spend a long time talking about Ebby. I enjoyed Ebby so much when I was receptionist. He was a loving person. He was intelligent, very well-educated person. It was good to talk to. Besides, he knew a lot of wings upstate New York. And we had a lot of fun talking about his relatives and mine. And one day, this is one of the stories, Eddie sometimes came in sober. Sometimes he came in drunk. If he came in drunk, I didn't talk. He came over, went through the lobby and threw himself onto the old couch, and that was it. One day, gentleman came in like an English businessman with the derby hat and a nice black coat and different colored pants, different gray pants or something, and umbrella. And he came over to my desk. Ebby was passed out like a light. And he said, I'm writing I've written all I really know about AA and the founders. But he said, I'm still interested in knowing more about the guy who brought the message to Bill. And I looked at him. I could not believe it. I still can't believe the story, but it's true. I did a naughty thing. I pointed to Ebby, so I quickly took him in to see one of the staff member. But I'll never forget that. That was something. But Ebby was there's so many stories. We took him down. Finally, he had a lengthy sobriety, 6 years, I guess it was, down in Texas. Everybody in New York. It was their ambition when they came into AA or had been in AA for a while to sponsor Ebby. To sober him up. And everybody tried that. So finally, it was getting to see, we're not having too much luck doing the whole thing. So one of our members got together, a little money, and put Ebby on a plane, sent him down to Texas. And he very grumpily, I don't want to go, I don't want to do this sort of thing at all. However, he got a job. Ebby always said if he had a job and a girl, he could stay sober. That was his criterion for staying sober. Down there he did. He had a job, a short slip overnight for him, very, very short. And then he, the awfully good guy in one of the airplane factories, I think it was, gave him a job, and he was there for about 5-6 years, and he was in charge of the girl who was in a very bad way. I think it was drugs as well as alcohol. And she had a hard time staying sober. And Ebby, he was such a wonderful help to her. Well, she finally died. Ebby came back and, of course, drunk right away. But there's so many stories, so many wonderful things to share with Ebby. I wish I could, go on and on and on. However, you can't really do that. Back to the things that make an old-timer. If you remember that Al-Anon groups before 1951 were called auxiliary or associate groups, family, wives, or just non-alcoholic groups. If you remember the Broadway plays, and I'm sure you do, at least some of them are done over and re-exhibited frequently, is Harvey with Frank Say, the big rabbit. And have all of you seen Harvey? Oh, you missed a lot. Cup of Trembling. Probably you haven't. That was not too Elizabeth Bergner, a fine actress from Europe, played in that, an alcoholic wife. Come Back, Little Sheba. You probably know about that one. And in the movies, Breakdown, September Remember, with Susan Hayward. There's Susan Hayward. She was really a great actress. And, of course, The Lost Weekend. That was tremendous. After that movie, I think there are at least 5 different Hollywood movies companies came hammering on our door wanting to make a movie of AA, and it was a big time because they were coming in, the writers were coming in all the time. I thought there was one script done by Paramount. I thought it was awfully good, and it would be very helpful because it was written by Bob Smith. And, but nobody thought that was too exciting. So, but I thought it'd be fun to say this is fun. Robert Smith. Then, Lost Weekend, Something to Live For, Voice in the Mirror. Then there were a lot of books. Wonderful books. This Believing World was one of my father's favorite books. Exploration of their many faiths and whatnot. He said, Lewis Brown was the author, and he said, of many movements, their failure is part due to too much organization, politics, money, and power. And that is so true when you figured even some of the 1800 movements that were for alcoholism never made it. So especially the Washingtonians, and you probably know a lot about those too. Anyway, there was a Glass Crutch by Jim Bishop. I love that name, Glass Crutch, right? And If a Man Be Man, Harold M. Now, Harold was a small office, very small. There were about 12 people, including 13 maybe, including Bill. And this book dealt with a man who had GP. Now, we were all very excited about this book because we knew it was a very helpful one to alcoholics. One day, as we said, drunks often came in and sat down just like they did intergroups in those days too. Would come in, sit, on the stool and on the chairs and whatnot. One day, this guy came in, sat for a long time, very silent, not making any trouble. And all of a sudden, bang, he got up and rolled, and there's snakes under my chair, snakes for this, and he was going around the room and had the girls from the back room were headed for the elevator because they thought that literally there were some snakes around, and they didn't want to be there. Bill, or one of the guys who was in the office, in the staff's office, and they came out and grabbed them all and said, no, it's okay, he's just having GP. And brought them all back again. But I can't tell you how many, it was just unbelievable how many things went on. Also, Dr. Yule's book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, and Upper Room, the daily meditation of the Methodist Church, was a very, very popular one. I guess still is. It used to be up in Michigan, and I think then it went back down in Tennessee to be published. Common Sense of Drinking, and we know Peabody. We call him Peabody in the East. Not Peabody, and of course varieties of religious experience. And there is just so much to tell about can't remember his name. William James, for heaven's sake. See what I mean? And he contributed so much, but it would take us all afternoon if I went into that. I wrote article, well, I'll talk about that later. Then, of course, there was Dr. Ian Jelinek book, The Disease of Alcoholism. The funny little story about that is he was a good friend of Bill. Bunky, Bill called him Funky. And Lois also described them as great pals and great buddies. Lois and I went on a trip to see the solar eclipse one day, and that was coming across Canada and coming down. And all of a sudden, Lois, who had been on her way, wanted to be on her way coming back from the eclipse and go over to New Jersey. Dr. Jelinek had died, and they had done a statue and a post pledge, or whatever you want to call it, of him. To honor him. They wanted to give that to Bill. And after the post-mortem kind of thing, Lois was going to get off at something of the city up there in Halifax and go over to New Jersey, accept the statue, and then go back to New York. Well, she couldn't do it, so they said, because there wasn't a proper background, transportation to get her there and get her back. So we both went back to New York, and then they sent the statue to Lois. There was no name on it, nothing to indicate what it was or who it was for or what it was about. Lois had to send it out and put all the information on herself. But that was, he did a wonderful job. Also, if you remember, an old-timer, if you remember the most popular and accepted protection of anonymity at the public level in those very early days was a Halloween mask you wore over your head. And some of the newspapers had these at one occasion. They were writing about AA and had a great big picture of this guy with a big mask on his face. Also, a couple of them walking through the back alleys with wearing masks on their way to a meeting. And I remember they were taking a picture of Bill at a meeting, and the photographer was standing back of Bill and taking a picture of the audience at full face. At which time, the guys, everybody in those days, wore white handkerchiefs. And then they pulled out their handkerchiefs and put them over their face, and they had and when you saw that picture, it was amazing, all these real odd-looking faces. But that was so funny. And you certainly are an old-timer if you ever said or heard anyone say, hey, Bill, who needs all those traditions, those damn traditions? And they just said that very often, believe me. And if you like, you still say the Alcoholics Foundation. If you're old-timer, you still say the Alcoholics Foundation. We're publishing for for GSO and AAWS. And if you remember the kind of newspaper language used by reporters to describe AA events, such as, say, the early 1942 annual New York dinner, these are some of the headlines. 400 alcoholics toast new sanity. 424 ex-slaves toast defeat of barley corn. Alcoholics Anonymous describes how to break rum's stranglehold. The newspapers also described the New York penthouse dinner as a noisy affair and a lively, I crossed out the word gay because that's being misinterpreted now. That said gay party. Much noise and laughter and plenitude after dinner speeches, and yet not a hangover or even a mention of a headache to show for it. And I thought, gosh, a penthouse certainly would be a good place if you wanted to raise the roof, right? Now, the Serenity Prayer, if you were an old-timer, if you said the AA prayer instead of Serenity Prayer. Now, I wrote manuscripts about 15 pages, and I called it Stalking the Wild Serenity Prayer. And I did a lot of background and research in it and got, oh gosh, just a pile of possible sources where this came to come from. If you don't mind, I think it's important because I don't know how many people are really acquainted. Let me just read, not the whole manuscript, but just the page and a half. Then I can read it quickly. The actual origin of the Serenity Prayer has been, over the years, a tantalizing, elusive, and some still feel an unsolved mystery. I wrote this in 81, by the way. Intriguing to those of us at GSO who have, at one time or another, attempted to trace the prayer to authorities, unimpeachable sources. The prayer entered unobtrusively into AA history in the year 1941. People get this date mixed up a lot. It was discovered in the in memoriam column of an early June edition of the New York Herald Tribune, and the exact wordings were, Mother, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Goodbye. Some 15 years later, reminiscing about this event, Ruth Hockathelius, our first non-alcoholic treasurer of secretary of our staff, said, it is a fact that Jack P. appeared at the office at 30 Beasley Street, Manhattan, one morning for a chat, and during the course of which he showed me the obituary store, notice, Whiskey, a Serenity Prayer. I was as much impressed with it as he was and asked him to leave it with me so that I could copy and use it for our letters to groups and loners. At this same time, Bobby B., who was also, this is an artist staffer, who was also terrifically impressed with it, undoubtedly used it in her work with the many she contacted during the 24th Street Clubhouse, where she was in charge of that. Horace C., another a local member on the Board of Trustees and helpful to Bill in her office and whatnot, had the idea of printing it on cards and paid for the first printing. All the local members, including Bill W., felt its relevance immediately. As Bill said in Comments of Age, never had we seen so much AA in so few words. On June 12, 1941, Ruth wrote Henry S., the Washington, D.C. member and printer by profession, saying, one of the boys up here got a clipping from a local newspaper, which is so very much to the point and so much to their liking that they have asked me to find out from you what it would cost to set it upon a small card, something like a visiting card, which can be carried in a wallet. Here it is. Would appreciate it if you would let me know right away. Henry answered back immediately and enthusiastically. He said, your cards are on the way, and my congratulations to the man who discovered that in the paper. I cannot recall any sentence that packed quite the wallop. That does, and during the day, have shown it to the AAs that dropped in, and in each case have been asked for copies. I sent you 500 copies. I'm inasmuch as you didn't say how many you wanted. If you need any more, let me know. Incidentally, I'm only a heel when I'm drunk, I hope. So naturally, there will be no charge for anything of this nature. Now, I'll take the very last notice about where it came from. The claim for authorship on behalf of Dr. Niebuhr is formidable. No doubt about that at all. At the very least, he certainly authored one version, at least, at which the 1941 Obit Prayer could have been an adaptation. And yet, there is still another source to consider, which also needs some investigation. Back in the late 1950s, a staff member, Anita R., browsing in a downtown New York bookstore, came upon a small card, beautifully bordered with a scroll design, in which was centered a printed prayer, which said, a prayer. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, give us serenity to accept what cannot be changed, courage to change what should be changed, and wisdom to know the one from the other, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. At the bottom it says, from a 14th century prayer often called the General's Prayer. The card originated from a bookstore in England called Mowbray, at that time 1957. We received at least 2 other references to this particular version. Who dat? The writer quoted from earlier in this letter, citing versions by St. Thomas Aquinas, and Dr. Endor had further information to offer. She said, I then found the prayer in another book, Between Dark and Dawn, by Frederick Tate, and the prayer was marked 14th century in the words, Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, give us serenity to cannot be changed, courage for souls that could be changed, and wisdom to know one from the other. I think that is if there's one really truly unsolved mystery in AA, it is who wrote the prayer. That really is wonderful. Now, do any of you know Calvin and Hobbes comic? It's a very, very good one. Okay. Now, Calvin is about 60 or 70 years old. Little, feisty, can be mean little kid. He has a stuffed tiger he carries around with him. Now, when nobody's around, the tiger becomes human and stands on its feet, and they talk and go having fun wherever they want to go. This particular one, Calvin says, know what I pray for? And Hobbes says, what? Calvin says, the strength to change what I can, the inability to accept what I can, and the incapacity to know the difference. The tiger says, you should lead an interesting life. Calvin says, oh, I already do. He's so fascinating. I think that is, I couldn't resist that one. Now, onward and upward, looking over those many years, what time is it? Okay, now I'm going to rush. I'm not going to get long side lights on time. Now, we're looking again back at those early days. I think the exciting and the dramatic events happening in AA, when I came along, had a lot to do, of course, with my staying there. Eventually forgot all about Mexico, still hadn't gotten down there yet. So I did P-pop activity and sculpture for a while, after I had come along. I think of what people, that decade of 45 to 55, as the most productive, unfolding, developing era ever found in AA. And I think that is the most important one. Things happen. The mystery or the excitement is that Bill did so many things, made so many things that were to be done, so many things that needed to be done, decisions to be taken, actions to take. And here it was, full of emphysema and depression. And it's amazing what he was able to do in that end. It was just that. Now, by the end of 41, we could count about 170 groups, 100 of them well organized, and membership nearly 6,000. The office was receiving about 125 inquiries a week. It was believed that 2 out of 3 active members were fully recovered, and every such case was employed. Now, that period, that 40s period, I was telling you about what we ladies were running around doing our own thing. That's true, but a lot of things were going on, and it would take a really, really big volume to tell everything about it. For example, groups were formed for young people, for women, for black members, interracial groups, nuns, priests, doctors, and lawyers, and pilots, as my friend here knows, birds of a feather. Meetings were held in boardrooms of banks and church basements and private living rooms, on main streets and skid rows, in the YMCAs, and hospitals, jails, and prisons, and aboard ships. And of course, I think we all know that if you've taken many cruises, then on board a ship, that there's so many. Have you meeting tonight for those who knew Bill W. Passengers in the freighters, and in the suburbs and in small rooms behind and above noisy local bars even. At home, the message was being carried abroad in far distances by traveling salesman members, this was after the war, and education travelers, by the shifting population of the late 40s post-war era. It was a really, really exciting thing that was going on, and I was part of that whole episode. It was really typical of what that not the following, not the other period, but that particular period. Abroad, news of AA was carried by our AA servicemen who had been, many of the AA members had been stationed in Japan and Germany, and they helped start AA over there a lot. In Japan, they had 13 steps originally, and they had wife groups. You know what the wife groups were called? Chrysanthemums. And in the early 1800s, the Washingtonians had the wives. Wives were all the time, were around, and part of the program, so to speak, because they were husbands and wives and families and part of that. And the wives in the Washingtonians were called Martha Washington, and they lasted for a long time. And there was just a effort to get going in these various areas that was really, really just terribly exciting. Say, for example, the Merchant Marine Pullman. Captain Jack F., who went, he was the head of one of the ships, and what do you call it, the executive one of the ships. And he would go, when he got sober and in AA, would take the ship along the coast of South Africa and across Japan and China, and go to the local bars and leave the book and ask if there was any alcoholic he could talk to. And indeed, by 1949, we had international Pullman groups. And of course, we had the doctors groups and all those that I mentioned before. U.S. embassies. You know, it's very interesting that some of the U.S. embassies helped that group. There's Russia. My gosh, I remember 1955, the lady who was the head of the health department there had called us on the telephone asking about, giving her some information about AA. And we got a book and whatnot, but we never expected to hear from her, and indeed we did not. But as time changed and the direction that changed, now and there was an American embassy in Moscow. One of the members helped in it. And I know one of my friends down in West Virginia, we were in travel over. So, in Norway and so many different stuff. Down in Mexico. Gosh, they had a hard time starting down in Mexico. Paulette down there was an American embassy doing all she could to get things started. Nothing was happening very fast until finally one of the guys in New York, the Catholic, realized what was probably the problem. So he got a boat together, a ship together, took the members down to Mexico City, talked to the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and explained what AA was all about. Then that changed the whole attitude. And AA started to proliferate rapidly throughout. So the whole story of how AA got started all over is just amazing. Then we had our small office staff in New York really had a handful to keep abreast and aware of all these service needs and past outreach situations. The several AA funds all over the world, and it was incredible for us to think of the loners, AA loners and groups in such faraway places as Sumatra, Japan, Nepal. Nepal asked us to come over and to help. Can you believe it? Way up on top of the world. He wrote us and asked us to send somebody over to help them, kept sober. And that's the North and South Pole and all around the middle. And it was just a wave of all this recovery going on in so many countries, and it still exists today. It really is still a lot of not so helpful things going on also. It was supposed to be unity, but a lot of it was disunity. For example, it's a decade of specific fears and potential dangers abounded, any of which could threaten the unity of the society from within. Since 1939, first how to get money and later how to handle it caused concern. For example, what is needed how much money would be needed, if any. Nobody thought we needed very much money at all. They didn't not get excited about that. Then there was anxiety that the groups, as they started to grow, might not support the services at headquarters foundation. The third fear concerning money was that bequests left to AA by non-AA friends, grateful relatives and admiring friends, might overwhelm the fellowship, and so firmed up the resolution of self-support action by the Board of Trustees in 1949. Another fear was seen in any dilution of AA's primary purpose. For example, taking in as members victims other than alcoholics. Who could be a member was often discussed, not on the grapevine. Bill wrote about it, problems other than alcohol. That was, Bill wrote about it in practically book he married. In the late 40s, and inadvertently otherwise, marrying AA to other agencies. I remember all of that so well. Working in the alcoholism field, particularly distressing and alarming episode was well, it's too long to go into all of that, but Marty making a little boo-boo with the MCA in 1946, saying that if they gave some money to help support MCA, Alcoholics Anonymous would benefit from it. Well, the next 4 years, it was a total chaos. And chaos in our office, because the office considered us responsible, for any of these things that were happening. There was dangers also in neglecting the importance of sponsorship, of power-driving egos, refusing to accept and relate the meaning of the anonymity tradition, the personal ambition. Individuals handed out endorsements and professionalizing the membership. There was dangers inherent in the management of clubs, of gambling and boy-girl shenanigans in the clubhouses. Should AA meetings be held regularly in the clubhouses was often discussed until it really got, and Dale wrote about that in the early grapevine. Too tough membership rules and regulations in some groups of local founders, knitting and local newspaper editors, they all considered themselves the founder, the leader. And that Bill didn't have much, to do with it at all anymore. Editors acting with group. So in some cases, in the problems with like interfering with group affairs, that was all over the place. I remember we got a letter from a group down south saying, please write their wives and tell them you've got to turn around and do things right. What happened, the problem was that they were in a clubhouse, 2 rooms plus a kitchen. Kitchen was one end, the AAs met in the middle, the wives met on the outside. Now, the wives, as you probably know, always stop early and get the snacks for the luncheon party. So they went through the AA club room to prepare for it. This did not appear well to the AA, and so they asked us to do something about it. I thought, heck, why doesn't they change rooms? Why isn't the white feet in the middle and the AA's on the outside, and then they wouldn't be any problem? Well, anyway, those were one of their things. As Bill put it, in the long form of Tradition 7, nothing can so surely destroy our spiritual heritage as fuel disputes over property, money, and authority. How right he was. When one thinks about it, then it's really a mystery and a miracle that AA as a society has faced and overcome all these collective fears and dangers and continue vigilant and on guard against their reoccurrence. It certainly is true. I told you, about Bill and Lois, of what they did during the 40s, and that the growth did continue with that desperate and kind of fractured unity that happened in the 40s. Since the office was not overseen properly either, really, and Bill and Lois were away traveling all the time, a lot of things happened that would not have needed to have happened. One of the things was that the trustees really didn't want to interfere. They wanted Bill not to interfere with the group. When I first met Bill in the office, that's what he was going on and on about. And that they weren't letting him do what he wanted to do or giving any support to it. And also that there was the problems of how you're going to put it all together to make it work. And so finally they got a general service committee at the office started that took command, and then things started to grow from then on. And then we got into the service decade, and we're still in them, and they're still spreading, and it's just a miracle the whole thing happened. It's interesting that the membership today is, when I first came, it was about 40,000 members and 1,200 groups. Now it is about 175 countries all over the world. Probably about 100,000 groups, and probably 2.5 million, probably by now 3 million members all over. And it is still spreading. It's America. Well, what I think is interesting about it, just to give a last, to have the closing of what Bill had to say too. He said, I'll quote Bill just one last time. This time from the 1947 edition pamphlet. He said, in the years that lie ahead, Alcoholics Anonymous faces the supreme test, the great ordeal of its own prosperity and success. I think it will prove the greatest trial of all. If we can weather that, our destiny will be secure. And I think that's very smart. Thank you very much for listening. It's so much to say, and so one day I'm going to put it all together, put it in a pamphlet or something, and anybody can use it.